Here are the 20 most expensive signings in Championship history, and in today's video we're going to be ranking them all into this tier list. These players were either a disaster, a bad signing, an alright signing, a good signing, or a great signing. And going off some of those names, it's fair to say that a hell of a lot of money has been wasted over the last few years in the Championship. If you do go on to enjoy today's video, do leave a like. 250 likes would be massively appreciated. But without any further ado, let's jump into the tier list. So we'll start out with Scott Hogan, the 20th most expensive signing in Championship history, making his move from Brentford over to Aston Villa. Now, at the time of the transfer, Scott Hogan was in incredibly high demand. During the first half of the season, he'd scored 14 league goals for Brentford. Aston Villa went in with that January signing, in the end in a deal worth around about £9 million. Ultimately, across 60 or so appearances for the club, he only scored the 10 goals. I'm going to put him down as a bad signing. I'm not quite going to go disaster, surely for the fact that Aston Villa did get a little bit of their money back when they went ahead and sold Hogan to Birmingham in the end, but all things considered, considering how high his profile was at Brentford at the time, this was a bad signing, all things considered. Gabriel Sara makes it in as the 19th most expensive signing in Championship history. He of course signed for Norwich during this transfer window in a deal which could be worth up and around £9 million. I'm going to put him into the alright category. We can't really judge this one as of right now. We've only seen him have a couple of appearances for Norwich this far into the season, and so we can't really draw all too many conclusions on that. Tom Ince to Stoke. He was part of that transfer window where Stoke were first relegated from the Premier League to the Championship. They spent a hell of a lot of money during this window under Gary Rowett, and I'm between disaster and bad signing. I think I'm going to put him in bad signing just for the fact that Stoke got over 100 games out of Tom Ince in the end, but all things considered, he was nowhere near the standard that they would have probably been expecting of him, given the money they paid for him, his previous record in the Championship for the likes of Blackpool and Derby, and with that squad of what looked like superstars at the time just failing to live up to expectations. Obviously, he's now playing his football for Reading, with his dad being the manager there in Poland, but yeah, bad signing, and Stoke have made a few of those since they've been down in the Championship, haven't they? Martin Braithwaite for Middlesbrough. He's going to be the first one that I'm going to put into that disaster signing category. Given what we expected of him at Borough, you know, we expected him to be the sort of guy to spearhead a promotion charge. It just didn't happen. And although we did see a few flashes of quality for him, ultimately he scored 9 goals for them across the 2 seasons he was there. There were so many off the field disruption issues that came along with him, some loan spells out, and ultimately leaving the club in quite controversial circumstances. All things around, considering the money Borough paid for him, this was an absolute disaster of a signing, and it's mental that he plays for Barcelona now. I just can't wrap my head around it because, yeah, in the Championship he was a disaster of a deal for Middlesbrough. Jordan Rhodes appears twice on today's list. We'll first of all go in for his Sheffield Wednesday transfer, of which I'm going to categorise as an absolute disaster. One of the worst signings in Sheffield Wednesday's history, given the money they paid for him, above that £10 million mark, and given the goal return they got from him in the end. I can't quite think of many other players who we've seen such a sharp, rapid decline of throughout their Championship career. The point in which Jordan Rhodes was at Huddersfield and Blackburn Rovers, and then the rapid decline, how we saw the injuries creeping into his game, and at Sheffield Wednesday just not living up to expectations whatsoever. His best goal scoring season for them was just 7 goals, which is criminal considering they paid so much money for him. So yeah, Sheffield Wednesday wasted a lot of money in their years in the Championship, and I think that Jordan Rhodes is right there at the top of the list in terms of wasted money. Ross Mccormack is a player who appears a couple of times on today's list. We'll first of all go in for his Fulham transfer from Leeds United, and all things around, I'm going to put this down as a great signing. Ross Mccormack, during that 2-year stint at Fulham, was one of the best forwards I've ever seen in the Championship. His overall game was absolutely unbelievable, and this was at a time where Fulham weren't dominating in the Championship. They were very much a one-man team during McCormack's 2 years at the club. They sold him and cashed in on him at the perfect point as well to Aston Villa. Made a profit on the play. He scored a ton of goals for them. All things around, this was a brilliant signing for Fulham. Next then we're going for Ivan Cavallaro from Wolves to Fulham. A signing who I don't think quite lived up to expectations given how electric he looked in that Wolves promotion promotion season from the Championship, albeit he has been present in 2 of Fulham's most recent Championship promotions. Didn't really have all too much of a role to play last time around, but in the 1920 season, chipped in with 13 goal contributions as they went on to be promoted that year. I'd chuck Cavallaro down as an alright signing, I think. Expectations were probably a lot higher at the time given what he's gone on to do for the club, but he did have that influence on that 1920 promotion. Draw the Rhodes to Middlesbrough. Ultimately, he was signed in January to go ahead and get this Borough side over the line and into the Premier League, and in the end he delivered on that promise really. He scored 6 goals for Borough during the second half of that season, added a few important goals which ultimately meant they finished second and got over the line, and on top of that as well, they pretty much made their money back from the sale of Rhodes, with Sheffield Wednesday going in for him. Ultimately, he didn't have that long-lasting impact that I'm sure a lot of Borough fans would have been hopeful for at the time, but I'm going to put it down as an alright signing. He chipped in with goals towards a promotion, and ultimately they sold him for a lot of money to Sheffield Wednesday. Matt Richie to Newcastle, probably not the most fashionable of players these days, and especially considering the projections of what we see for Newcastle over these next few years. These days he probably finds himself as surplus to requirements, but he's now closing in on 200 club appearances for Newcastle, and given his role in that promotion season, the years of service he's given to them in the Premier League as well, and how adaptable and versatile he's actually been over those years, I'm going to say he was a good signing. In that promotion season from the Championship, he had 19 goal contributions, and considering how he has adapted his role over these years in the Premier League, I think this one was a good signing. Dwight Gale from Crystal Palace to Newcastle, I'm also going to put down as a good signing. Also had that starring role to play in Newcastle's promotion from the Championship, scoring 23 goals that season. I think the mistake Newcastle made with Dwight Gale was failing to cash in on him at the right time. You know, the perfect point to go ahead and bank in on Dwight Gale was after that fantastically prolific loan spell he'd had with West Brom. Had they sold him at that point, they probably could have got 10 million plus for him. They didn't go ahead and do that, and ultimately he was never the most natural fit into Newcastle in the Premier League, but for the goals he put up during that promotion season, I'm going to say it was a good signing. Andre Gray from Brentford to Burnley, I'm going to put down as a great signing. Ultimately, in his first season with Burnley, won the Championship Golden Boot with 23 goals, securing promotion for Burnley. Then with that season in the Premier League, scored 9 goals for them, ultimately then got the move to Watford off the back of that, and Burnley made a profit on a player which they then went to reinvest in the rest of the squad. So yeah, great signing I think for Burnley, that one. Isaac Mbenza at Huddersfield Town, my god, this was a transfer which did not work out. Now they had him on loan in the Premier League with an obligation to go ahead and buy in the following summer, so it went through technically as a Championship signing, and in the Championship I think this one was a bit of a disaster, to be honest, given the money they spent on him, upwards of around about £11 million according to Transfermarkt. The most frustrating thing with Mbenza was that he did show flashes of promise. You know, that first season under Corberon when he was brought in to the squad a little bit more, scored 5 goals, got 7 assists, some nice free kicks and things like that, but ultimately there seemed to be a few disruptive issues going on off the pitch. They extended his contracts in the hope of getting a little bit of a sale out of him, but he ended up terminating his contract just a few months into the following season, and ultimately secured a free transfer move over to Qatar. So yeah, all things round, considering how much money they spent on him, this was a disaster of a transfer. Jonathan Kodjia from Bristol City to Aston Villa. He's a bit of a funny one to rank really, because his first season with Villa in the Championship, absolutely prolific, scored 19 goals for them. His second season got pretty derailed by injuries, and I think from that point onwards, in a Villa shirt, he was never really quite the same player. He did play a part in Villa's promotion the following season though, sort of as a supporting act to Tammy Abraham, a lot of his appearances that season coming off the bench, but he did chip in with 9 goals during that promotion season. I'm going to put it down as an alright transfer. 19 goals in his first season was fantastic, but I think injury somewhat derailed his Aston Villa career, which was a shame because he was such a good player in that first year and at Bristol City before that. Benigavobe came in at Stoke during their first season back in the Championship, a window in which they spent a hell of a lot of money, and I think Afobe's transfer has to go down as a disaster. He scored 8 Championship goals in that first season with Stoke, and then spent the next 3 years of his contract out on loan, and Stoke got absolutely none of that value back that they paid for him for a roundabout fee of £12 million, which seems crazy looking back on it. Yeah, disaster of a transfer, no questions asked for that one. Harry Wilson in at Fulham, I'm going to put him down as a great signing. There was quite a lot of scrutiny on Harry Wilson at the time because it was a transfer window where not a lot of Championship clubs were spending a lot of money because of COVID and things like that, and Fulham went ahead and dropped around about 12 million on Harry Wilson, but he more than repaid that with how vital he was in Fulham's promotion campaign last time around. 10 goals, 19 assists, the link-up play he had with Mitrovic, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he's capable of doing this season in the Premier League, because from what they got out of him last season, there's no doubt it was a great signing in the end. We've already had Ross McCormack once on this list so far, but his second transfer coming from Fulham to Aston Villa has to go down as an absolute disaster, arguably the biggest disaster transfer of the top 20 most expensive signings, given how good and the levels he was playing at Fulham. To come to Aston Villa and to just be absolutely nowhere near that player, this was a rapid fall off from Ross McCormack. Ultimately, a lot of issues he had going on at Villa. He wasn't match fit, turning up to training. We had that whole ridiculous story with him not being able to get over his electric gate and get to training on time because that wasn't working, and ultimately he scored just 3 goals for Villa before being shipped out on several loan spells. So yeah, how Ross McCormack fell off so quickly, this was arguably the worst signing in Championship history. Helder Costa was, if I remember rightly, Wolves' first sort of major transfer under their new ownership, obviously kick-starting this Portuguese era, which we're still seeing in full swing at the club right now. Signed for around about 13 million initially, coming on loan, scored 10 goals, got 8 assists in that first season, which was probably his best season at Molineux, to be honest. He did still have a role to play in Wolves' promotion up from the Championship to the Premier League in that ridiculously talented squad Nuno had at his disposal, and then after that became a little bit of a bit part player, but ultimately Wolves sold him on for a profit to Leeds United for 15 million, and I think because of that, because of the role he played, he chipped in with a few moments towards promotion. I'm going to put it down as a good signing, especially with them making profit on him, selling him on for 15 million to Leeds. João Carvalho, 13.5 million to Nottingham Forest. He is a signing which I'm still gutted that it didn't work, because especially early on in his Forest days, that first half of that season when he'd originally signed for them, he did look so promising from a creative aspect, but all things considered, this one has to go down as a bad signing at the very least. In the end, his transfer from Nottingham Forest to Olympiacos went down as an undisclosed fee, so it's not totally clear how much money Nottingham Forest actually got back from the sale of Carvalho, but it was a massive shame given how promising he started out and then in the end how it worked out for him at Forest. As the second most expensive signing in Championship history, we then have Breit Assombalonga moving from Nottingham Forest to Middlesbrough. Now, Assombalonga had plenty of years at Borough, 4 seasons there in total, got into double figures in 3 of those 4 seasons in terms of a goal return, but even with some of the numbers he put up, I think Borough fans were expecting a hell of a lot more from Assombalonga. He played over 160 matches for the club and averaged a goal every sort of 3 to 4 matches, but inconsistency is probably the best way to sum up his spell at Middlesbrough overall, and given he's the second most expensive signing in Championship history, I have to put this one down as a bad signing, I think. Had he cost a little bit less, I would have probably put him into that alright category, but for how much money they spent on him, the fact they didn't get anything back in terms of a transfer fee for him either, yeah, this one was a bad signing. Finishing it off then with Ruben Neves, the most expensive Championship signing in Championship history as things stand right now, and there's no question where this one's going in. It is of course a great signing. I still can't believe to this day that Wolves still have Ruben Neves at the club. I've got to see him live and in the flesh a few times. I was actually at Molineux for Preston's cup game against them the other week, and Neves was absolutely brilliant in the short cameo that he got in that game. Probably the best technical player I've seen in terms of a holding midfielder ever play in the Championship, and the fact they got him to come to a championship club, you know, that they were at the time, is still absolutely baffling to me, and the fact he's still a Wolves player as well. So no doubt about that. Ruben Neves, great signing. There we have it though, guys. Those are my personal rankings for the 20 most expensive signings in championship history. Would you agree with my categorizations of each player? Let me know down below. But apart from that, guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. But apart from that, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.